Commander Ji-woo Kim stood on the bridge of the Eternal Defiance, watching the stars streak past the viewport. She was 38 years old, though the war had aged her beyond those numbers. Gray streaks ran through her black hair, and thin lines marked the corners of her eyes. 7 years of fighting would do that to anyone. "Commander, we're approaching the neutral zone," said Hyunwoo Park, her second in command. He stood beside her, concern written across his face. "I still think this is a trap." Ji-woo nodded slowly. She thought so too. The Talreth Empire had sent a message 3 days ago, requesting peace talks. After 7 years of brutal war, they suddenly wanted to negotiate. It seemed too easy, too convenient. "Probably," Ji-woo agreed. "But we have to try. If there's even a small chance to end this without more deaths, we take it." The Talreth were an insectoid species that had swept through this sector of space like a plague. They outnumbered humanity 10 to 1. Their ships were faster, their weapons stronger. By all logic, humanity should have fallen years ago. But Ji-woo had refused to let that happen. She had developed tactics the Talreth couldn't predict. Guerrilla strikes, hidden supply routes, unexpected alliances with smaller species. The Talreth called her the Unyielding, because she never gave up ground without making them pay for every meter. "Communications incoming," said Da-Yun Choi from her station. The young officer was only 22, fresh-faced and eager. She admired Ji-woo more than anyone else on the ship. "The Talreth delegation is ready to meet." Ji-woo straightened her uniform. The silver phoenix insignia on her collar caught the light. It had been her symbol throughout the war, representing humanity's ability to rise from ashes. "Hyunwoo, you have the bridge," Ji-woo said. "If anything goes wrong, jump to hyperspace immediately. Don't wait for me." "Commander." "That's an order." She took a small team with her on the shuttle. Tae-Yang Lee, her best pilot, flew them toward the meeting point. The neutral station hung in space between the two fleets, a tiny bubble of supposed safety. As they docked, Ji-woo felt the weight of what she carried. Not just her own life, but the hopes of billions of humans across dozens of colonies. They looked to her as their symbol of resistance. The station's corridors were cold and metallic. Ji-woo's boots echoed as she walked toward the conference room. Her security team flanked her, weapons ready but not raised. The Talreth delegation waited inside. High Warlord Kratos stood at the far end of the table, his chitinous armor gleaming. His compound eyes reflected no emotion that Ji-woo could read. "Commander Kim," Kratos clicked in the translated speech. "We meet at last." "Warlord," Ji-woo replied, taking her seat. "Your message spoke of peace terms." "Yes, peace." Kratos's mandibles moved in what might have been a smile. "The Empire grows weary of this conflict. You have proven surprisingly persistent." Ji-woo kept her face neutral. Something felt wrong. The other Talreth delegates stood too still, too ready. "What terms do you propose?" she asked. "Unconditional surrender," Kratos said simply. "You have fought well, Commander, but you cannot win. Surrender now, and we will spare your colony worlds." "You know I can't do that." "We know." Kratos made a gesture with one clawed hand. Everything happened too fast. The doors burst open. Talreth warriors poured into the room. Ji-woo's security team opened fire, but they were overwhelmed in seconds. She dove under the table, reaching for her sidearm. "Eternal Defiance, emergency extraction," she shouted into her comm. "It's a trap. Get out of." An explosion rocked the station. Ji-woo felt the floor buckle beneath her. Someone grabbed her arm, Tae-Yang, bleeding from a head wound, but still moving. "This way," he shouted. They ran through collapsing corridors. Behind them, Talreth warriors gave chase. Tae-Yang fired backward as they ran, buying seconds of time. The shuttle bay was ahead. Ji-woo could see their ship through the viewport, with Hyun-woo's face visible in the pilot's seat. He had disobeyed orders and come for her himself. They were 10 meters away when the plasma bolt hit Ji-woo's back. The pain was immediate and absolute. She fell forward, the world spinning. Taeyang caught her, dragging her toward the shuttle. No, 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 Taeyang was saying. But his voice sounded distant. Somehow, they made it to the shuttle. The doors closed, and Hyunwoo punched the engines. The station exploded behind them as they cleared the docking port. "Medical bay, now!" Hyunwoo shouted, but Jiwoo knew. She had seen enough battlefield wounds to recognize a fatal one. The plasma had burned through her spine, her lungs. She was bleeding internally, systems shutting down, one by one. Da-eun appeared above her, tears streaming down her face. "Commander, stay with us. Please stay with us." "My recorder," Jiwoo managed to say. "Get it." Hyunwoo brought her personal recording device. His hands shook as he activated it. "For whoever comes after," Jiwoo said, fighting for each word. "Don't let them tell you this was for nothing. Every battle, every sacrifice, it was for something real. For the children who deserve to grow up free. For the morning sun on colony worlds. For the right to choose our own path." She coughed, tasting blood. "The Talrith think power is everything. But they're wrong. Our strength isn't in weapons or numbers. It's in why we fight. We fight because we love what we're protecting." Her fingers touched the Phoenix insignia on her collar. "Give this to those who continue," she whispered. "The fight doesn't end with me. It can't. There are too many who still need protecting." Hyunwoo took the insignia, tears falling on the silver metal. Tell them I was proud. Proud to serve. Proud to stand with all of you." Jiwoo's vision was fading. "Don't mourn too long. There's still work to do." "Number. Jiwoo," Hyunwoo said, his voice breaking. He never used her first name on duty. "We can't do this without you." "You can," she said. "You will. Because that's what humans do. We survive. We persist. We rise." Da-eun squeezed her hand. Taeyang stood at attention, saluting. The medical staff had stopped trying to save her, knowing it was impossible. "Hyunwoo," Jiwoo said, so quietly he had to lean close. "Don't let hatred consume them. We're better than that. Remember why we fight." "I will," he promised. "I swear it." Jiwoo smiled, though it cost her everything. She thought of her daughter, Min Seo, safe on Earth. She thought of every soldier she had commanded, every life she had tried to protect. She thought of the humans yet to be born, who would live free because of what they had done here. "For those who come after," she whispered. And then Commander Ji-woo Kim closed her eyes for the last time. The shuttle fell silent, except for the hum of the engines. Hyunwoo held her hand long after she was gone. The Phoenix insignia pressed between their palms. Outside, the Talrith fleet was already broadcasting their victory across all channels. They had killed the unyielding. They had cut the head from the human resistance. The war, they declared, was over. They had no idea what they had just begun. Hyunwoo finally stood, gently placing Jiwoo's insignia on her chest. He looked at his crew, at the young faces marked by grief and shock. "We're going home," he said quietly. "And then we make sure her words reach everyone. Every human needs to hear what she said. They need to know what she believed." Da-eun wiped her tears and returned to her station. Taeyang took the controls. They jumped to hyperspace, carrying the body of humanity's greatest commander back to Earth. Behind them, the Talreth celebrated. Ahead of them, humanity waited, unaware that their symbol of hope had fallen. But Jiwoo had been right about one thing. The fight wasn't over. Not even close. It was only just beginning. 2 weeks after Jiwoo died, her body returned to Earth in a casket draped with the human flag. Billions watched the funeral procession from every colony world, every station, every ship in the fleet. The coffin moved slowly through the streets of New Seoul, carried by 6 soldiers who had served under her command. Hyun-woo walked behind the casket, wearing his formal uniform. He hadn't slept properly since that day. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ji-woo falling, saw the light leaving her eyes. The Phoenix insignia sat in his pocket, a constant weight against his chest. Da-eun marched in the procession too, her face carefully blank. She cried alone at night, but during the day she held herself together. That's what Ji-woo would have wanted. At the cemetery, Admiral Byung-ho Nam gave the official speech. He talked about duty and sacrifice, about Ji-woo's tactical brilliance and her dedication to humanity. The words were true but felt hollow somehow. They didn't capture the person Ji-woo had been. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The screens across Earth and every colony world lit up with Ji-woo's final recording, the message she had spoken while dying in that shuttle. Hyun-woo had debated whether to release it, but in the end, he knew it was what she wanted. Ji-woo's face appeared on billions of screens. She looked tired and in pain, but her eyes held steady. For whoever comes after, her voice echoed across humanity. Don't let them tell you this was for nothing. Every battle, every sacrifice, it was for something real. For the children who deserve to grow up free. For the morning sun on colony worlds. For the right to choose our own path. People stopped on the streets to watch. Families gathered around their screens. Soldiers stood at attention in their barracks. The Talreth think power is everything, Ji-woo continued. But they're wrong. Our strength isn't in weapons or numbers. It's in why we fight. We fight because we love what we're protecting. In the crowd at the funeral, a young girl pushed her way forward. Min Seo-kang was 16 years old, tall like her mother, but with the same determined eyes. She wore her military academy uniform, pressed and perfect. No one had seen her since Ji-woo's death. She had stayed away from the media, away from the public eye. But now she stood before the casket, and security didn't stop her. Min Seo reached into her jacket and pulled out something silver. The Phoenix insignia. Hyun-woo had given it to her the day before, thinking she would keep it private. A family heirloom. Instead, Min Seo pinned it to her uniform, right over her heart, where everyone could see. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The cameras captured her standing there, young and defiant, wearing her mother's symbol. That image spread across the galaxy faster than any military broadcast. In military academies, cadets saw Min Seo standing at her mother's grave. In refugee camps, children watched the recording of Ji-woo's final words. In factories and farms and stations, humans who had been surviving day by day suddenly felt something shift inside them. The next morning, recruitment centers across human space were flooded. They weren't the usual recruits. These were teenagers, most barely old enough to enlist. Some lied about their ages to get in. They came in groups, supporting each other, carrying homemade versions of the Phoenix insignia. We want to finish what she started, they said. The recruitment officers didn't know what to do. This wasn't normal. Wars were usually fought by professionals, by career soldiers. These were children, really, with fire in their eyes and determination in their voices. The movement grew faster than anyone could control. A video went viral of a 17-year-old boy named Bo Ram standing outside a recruitment center. Someone had asked him why he wanted to fight. Because she died protecting us, Bo Ram said simply. Now it's our turn to protect each other. They started calling themselves Cubs. The name came from a Talrith broadcast that mocked the young humans trying to enlist. Foolish cubs, playing at war. The Talrith announcer had sneered. The humans took the name and made it their own. Within a week, 50,000 young people had enlisted. Within 2 weeks, the number doubled. They came from every colony, every background, rich and poor, educated and not, all united by one thing. They had heard Ji-woo's words and decided to act. Admiral Byung-ho watched this wave of enlistment with growing horror. He called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. We can't send children to war, he said, slamming his hand on the table. Most of them have never even fired a weapon. They're enlisting legally, one of his officers pointed out. We can't stop them. We can't stop them. Then, we slow down their training. Keep them in boot camp for years if we have to. Maybe the war will be over by then. But Hyun-woo, who had been sitting silently, finally spoke up. You're afraid they'll die, he said. So am I. But Ji-woo taught me something important. Sometimes the choice isn't between safety and danger. Sometimes it's between fighting for what you love or losing it forever. These are children, Byung-ho insisted. They're humans, Hyun-woo corrected. And they've made their choice. We can either train them properly or send them out unprepared. Which would Ji-woo want? The admiral had no answer to that. The cubs entered training. The military had to create new facilities just to handle the numbers. Da-eun volunteered to help train them, leaving her position on Hyun-woo's ship. I need to do this, she told him. I need to help them become what she believed we could be. Tracted, she told him. In the training camps, something remarkable happened. The cubs weren't just learning to fight. They were learning Ji-woo's tactics, studying her recorded battles, memorizing her strategies. They quoted her words to each other during hard times. For those who come after, became their motto. The oldest cubs took care of the youngest. They formed tight bonds, tighter than normal military units. They weren't just soldiers being trained. They were becoming something else. A movement. A force driven not by hatred of the Talrith, but by love of what they were protecting. 3 months after Ji-woo's death, the 1st Cub Battalion graduated from basic training. Min-seo stood among them. She had turned 17 2 weeks earlier and immediately enlisted. Some had argued she should be kept safe, protected as Ji-woo's daughter. But Min-seo had shut down those arguments with a single sentence. My mother died protecting others. I will live doing the same. The graduation ceremony was broadcast across human space. 50,000 cubs stood in perfect formation, each one wearing a phoenix insignia on their uniform. Admiral Byung-ho gave the graduation speech. He had fought against this moment. But now that it was here, he felt something unexpected. Pride, mixed with terror. You are the youngest force we've ever fielded, he said. Many people think you're too young, too inexperienced. They think the Talreth will crush you. He paused, looking across the sea of young faces. Prove them wrong, he said simply. The cubs roared their approval. After the ceremony, Hyun-woo found Min-seo standing alone, looking up at a statue of her mother that had been erected at the training center. She would be proud of you, he said. Min-seo touched the phoenix insignia on her chest. She would tell me I'm being foolish, that I should stay safe, finish school, live a normal life. Probably, Hyun-woo agreed. But she would understand why you're doing it anyway. Will we win? Min-seo asked. It was the first time Hyun-woo had heard uncertainty in her voice. I don't know, he admitted. But I know this. The Talreth thought killing your mother would end the war. Instead, they created something they can't understand. They showed us exactly why we need to fight. Min-seo nodded slowly. Every cub here knows they might die. But we're not afraid. We're not doing this for revenge. We're doing this because someone has to. And it might as well be us. She looked at Hyun-woo with eyes so like her mother's it hurt. The Talrith killed one person and thought they won, she said. But Mom wasn't just one person. She was an idea. A belief that we could be better. That we could protect what matters. You can't kill an idea. Hyun-woo felt tears building but held them back. Your mother said almost the same thing once. I know, Min-seo said. I listened to her recordings 100 times. I'm going to make sure every Talrith understands what they started when they killed her. The next day, the cubs shipped out to their first assignments. 50,000 young humans heading to the front lines. They went singing, not marching. Old songs and new ones, all mixed together. Da-eun watched them go from the observation deck, her hand pressed against the window. They're so young, she whispered. We all were once, Taeyang said beside her. But they're not going alone. We'll be there with them. Across the galaxy, The Talreth received reports of the mass enlistment. High Warlord Krethos read the intelligence with satisfaction. "More cubs to slaughter," he said to his officers. "The humans are sending their children to die. This war will be over in months." But one of his advisors, a Talreth scout who had observed human colonies, spoke up hesitantly. "My lord, perhaps we should reconsider. These humans, they're different from before. They're not afraid. Fear is irrelevant," Krethos snapped. "They will learn what happens to those who oppose the Empire." The advisor said nothing more. But he had seen the broadcasts, had watched the cubs training. He had heard Jiwoo's final words. Even if he didn't fully understand them, something had changed in humanity. The Talreth had thought they were fighting a desperate, dying species. But the humans who now enlisted weren't desperate. They were determined. The war was about to enter a new phase. And neither side fully understood what was coming. 1 year after Jiwoo's death, the phoenix emblem had become more than a military symbol. It was everywhere. Kyung-suk Han was 17 years old and shouldn't have been anywhere near a Talreth prison camp. But she was there anyway, along with 12 other cubs, crawling through ventilation shafts that were barely wide enough for human bodies. "2 guards ahead," whispered the cub beside her, checking a scanner stolen from Talreth supplies. Kyung-suk nodded. She had studied every prison break Jiwoo had ever executed. The key was speed and surprise. Move fast, hit hard, disappear before the enemy could respond. The cubs dropped from the vents into the corridor. The Talreth guards barely had time to react before being stunned unconscious. Kyung-suk led her team to the cell blocks. Inside, 43 human prisoners waited. Most were soldiers captured in earlier battles. Some were civilians taken during colony raids. All of them looked thin and tired. "We're getting you out," Kyung-suk said simply. She wore a phoenix patch on her armor, clearly visible. An older prisoner, a captain from the regular fleet, stared at her. "You're just kids. We're cubs," Kyung-suk corrected. "Now let's move before they realize we're here." They made it out with all 43 prisoners. 3 cubs stayed behind to cover the retreat and were captured, but they knew the risks when they volunteered. Operations like this happened across Talreth space. Cubs specialized in what they called Phoenix insertions. Impossible missions that older soldiers wouldn't attempt. Rescues, sabotage, intelligence gathering. They took risks because they believed in what they were doing. One Shikbei was different from most cubs. While others trained for combat, he worked in engineering, designing new ship systems. He was 19 and already considered a genius by the technical staff. His greatest creation was called the Phoenix Modification. "It's simple," one Shik explained to a room full of skeptical officers. "When a ship is critically damaged and about to die anyway, this system lets you overcharge the engines one last time. You get about 30 seconds of incredible speed and power." "And then?" an officer asked. "And then the ship tears itself apart," one Shik admitted. "But in those 30 seconds, you can either escape to safety or ram an enemy vessel with devastating force." "That's suicide," the officer said. "It's a choice," one Shik corrected. "Ships die in battle anyway. This way, they can choose how they die. They can choose to save others or take an enemy with them." The modification was controversial, but cubs volunteered to fly Phoenix-equipped ships anyway. They understood what it meant. Every flight might be their last, but they would go down fighting, protecting what mattered. Daun, now a captain running cub intelligence operations, tracked the war's progress from her command center. The numbers told a story that both thrilled and terrified her. Cub casualties were high, too high. For every victory, there were deaths. Young people who should have been starting careers, falling in love, having families. Instead, they died in space battles or ground combat, their lives cut short. But they kept coming. For every cub who fell, 5 more enlisted. "We're losing individuals," Hyunwoo said, standing beside her as they reviewed reports. But we're winning the war. Is that enough? Da-un asked quietly. Hyunwoo was silent for a long moment. I don't know. But it's what they chose. We honor that by making sure their deaths mean something. On the front lines, the Cubs had developed a reputation. These young humans who fought without hesitation, who protected each other fiercely, who seemed to care more about completing the mission than surviving it. Seo Jun-oh learned this firsthand when his reconnaissance ship was shot down over a Talrith-controlled moon. He survived the crash, but was captured within hours. The Talrith interrogators expected him to break easily. He was young, injured, and alone deep in enemy territory. But Seo Jun had been a cub for 8 months. He had Ji-woo's final message memorized, had studied her example, had learned what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. Why do you fight? His interrogator, a Talreth officer named Velrin, asked. You're young. You could surrender, save yourself. Seo Jun smiled, despite his pain. You don't understand. I'm not fighting to save myself. I'm fighting to save others. That's why you'll lose this war. Explain, Velrin demanded. You killed Commander Kim, thinking it would end our resistance, Seo Jun said. But you didn't understand what she meant to us. She wasn't just a leader. She showed us who we could be, what we could fight for. He recited Ji-woo's final message, word for word, with perfect clarity. For whoever comes after. Don't let them tell you this was for nothing. Every battle, every sacrifice, it was for something real. Velrin listened, disturbed by the conviction in the young human's voice. You're not afraid, Velrin observed. I'm terrified, Seo Jun admitted. But fear doesn't matter. What matters is why I'm here. And I'm here because children deserve to grow up free. Because colony worlds deserve to see morning sun. Because we have the right to choose our own path. The interrogation continued for days. Seo Jun never broke. Eventually, he was rescued by another cub insertion team. But the encounter left Velrin thinking about things he had never questioned before. The war continued. Battles were won and lost. Cubs died and more enlisted. The Phoenix emblem spread further. Then came Operation Burning Nest. High Warlord Krithos had finally had enough. The Cubs were costing him victories, resources, and reputation. He planned a massive, coordinated strike against Cub training facilities and supply bases. If he couldn't break them in battle, he would destroy them before they finished training. Kill the Cubs in their nests, he told his commanders. Show humanity the cost of their resistance. The operation launched on a Tuesday morning. Earth time. Talrith fleets hit 15 targets simultaneously. The attacks were devastating. Training facilities burned. Supply depots exploded. Thousands of Cubs died. Many before they ever saw real combat. Admiral Byung-ho watched the reports come in, his face gray with shock and grief. We're losing an entire generation, he whispered. But something unexpected happened. The surviving Cubs didn't retreat. They didn't break. They regrouped and counterattacked with a fury that shocked everyone. At Training Base Gamma, where a Talrith fleet had destroyed half the facilities, the surviving Cubs used the damaged buildings as weapons. They collapsed structures onto enemy landing craft, used debris fields as cover, turned their home into a fortress. At Supply Depot Omega-9, Cubs piloting cargo ships loaded with fuel deliberately crashed into Talreth destroyers, turning peaceful vessels into devastating bombs. Across every target, the pattern repeated. The Cubs took the Talreth's momentum and turned it against them. They fought, not with military precision, but with desperate creativity. Every damaged ship became a weapon. Every destroyed building became cover. Every fallen Cub became a reason for others to fight harder. Hyun-woo coordinated the defense from the command center, watching in awe as these young people did the impossible. They're using Tactic 57, Da-un said, recognizing the pattern. The one Ji-woo used at the Battle of Carter's Moon. They've adapted it, Hyun-woo corrected. Made it their own. She would be so proud. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it finally ended, Operation Burning Nest had failed. The Talreth had dealt damage. Yes, but they had lost 3 times what they expected. Whole fleets had been destroyed or crippled. The Cubs had survived and won, but the cost was terrible. 8,000 Cubs had died in a single day. The youngest was 15, had lied about their age to enlist. The oldest was 23, a veteran by Cub standards. Memorial services were held across human space. The grief was overwhelming. These weren't just soldiers. They were somebody's children, somebody's friends, somebody's loved ones. Minseo stood before a memorial wall, looking at thousands of names carved into stone. So many phoenixes that would never rise again. Was it worth it? Someone asked behind her. She turned to find an older civilian, a man who had lost his grandson in the battle. I don't know, Minseo admitted honestly. But I know this. Your grandson and all these others, they chose to fight. They chose to protect people like you. We honor them by continuing, by making sure their sacrifice means something. The old man nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. My grandson used to talk about your mother. Said she was why he enlisted. Said if she could stand against impossible odds, so could he. Then he understood, Minseo said quietly. That's what the Phoenix means. Rising when you're needed, even when it costs everything. After Operation Burning Nest failed, something shifted in the Talreth Empire. Velrin, the interrogator who had questioned Seo-jun, was not alone in his doubts. Other Talreth warriors were questioning the war, questioning whether they were fighting for something meaningful or just following orders. A resistance movement began within the Talreth military. Small at first, just whispers and doubts, but it was there, growing. High Warlord Krithos saw his victory slipping away. He had killed thousands of Cubs, but millions more enlisted. He had destroyed their bases, but they rebuilt and fought from the ruins. He had tried to break their spirit, but somehow made it stronger. What are these humans? He demanded of his advisors. No one had a good answer. The Cubs shouldn't exist, shouldn't fight this way, shouldn't win. But they did exist. They did fight. And increasingly, they were winning. The war entered its final phase, and neither side would ever be the same. 3 years after Jiwoo's death, the war had transformed completely. The Cubs were no longer just young recruits learning to fight. They had become veterans, seasoned warriors who had survived battles that should have killed them. Colonel Minseo Kang stood on the bridge of the Phoenix Ascendant, the flagship of the 1st Phoenix Legion. She was 19 years old and commanded 20,000 Cubs who had survived since the beginning. They called themselves the Originals, the first generation who had taken their mother's emblem and made it their own. All fleets report ready, said her second-in-command, Su Bin, who had risen through the ranks through skill and determination. Minseo studied the tactical display. Ahead lay Talreth Prime, the homeworld of their enemy. The war was ending, one way or another, and it would end here. But something had changed in the last few months. The Talreth Empire was fracturing from within. Velrin, the interrogator who had questioned the captured Cub years ago, had become something impossible. A Talreth rebel. He led a faction of warriors who had grown tired of Krithos's endless war, tired of fighting an enemy who refused to be broken. Incoming transmission, the communications officer reported. It's from the Talreth rebel fleet. Velrin's insectoid face appeared on the screen, translated through the computer. Commander Kang, he said formally. My forces are in position. We will stand down our weapons and allow you passage to Talreth Prime. But I must warn you. Krithos has activated the Empire's final weapon. What weapon? Minseo demanded. A planet destroyer. Built in secret over many years. Its target is Earth. The bridge fell silent. Every person there understood what that meant. If the weapon reached Earth, billions would die. Everything they had fought for would end. How long do we have? Minseo asked. forcing her voice to stay calm. 12 hours. The weapon is already en route. Minseo looked at her tactical board, doing calculations in her head. They couldn't reach Earth in time, and still complete the assault on Talrith Prime. They would have to split their forces. This is exactly what my mother faced, she said quietly. Impossible choices. No good options. Subin stepped beside her. What would she do? Minseo smiled sadly. She would protect as many people as possible, even if it cost everything. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. Cubs on thousands of ships listened as their commander spoke. We face a choice, Minseo said. Krethos has sent a planet killer toward Earth. We can either all return to defend our home, or we can split our forces. Half of us finish the war here, half of us go back to protect Earth. She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. I won't order this. You choose. Anyone who wants to defend Earth, break formation now. Anyone who wants to end this war here, stay with me. Either choice is right. Either choice honors what we fight for. For a long moment, no one moved. Then exactly half the fleet broke formation, turning back toward Earth at maximum speed. The remaining Cubs stayed with Minseo to assault Talrith Prime. For those who come after, someone said over the comm. For those who come after. The entire fleet echoed. Aboard one of the ships racing back to Earth, Subin took command. She led 20,000 Cubs toward home, knowing they might not arrive in time. But they had to try. Push the engines to maximum, she ordered. Beyond maximum. I don't care if the ships burn out. We get home or die trying. The crews worked frantically, coaxing every bit of speed from their vessels. Some ships did burn out their engines. The Cubs aboard evacuated to other vessels, leaving ghost ships drifting in space. On Earth, Admiral Byung-ho received the warning about the planet killer. He had mere hours to evacuate what he could, but there wasn't enough time to save everyone. Billions would die. He prepared Earth's defenses, knowing they would be insufficient. The weapon was too powerful, too fast. Then the Cub fleet appeared on long-range sensors, racing toward Earth at impossible speeds. How? Byung-ho whispered. They couldn't have made it this fast. Sir, an officer reported. Multiple Cub ships are showing critical engine failures. They're burning out their drives. Byung-ho understood. The Cubs were destroying their own ships to reach Earth faster. They were sacrificing their vessels, sometimes their lives, to arrive in time. The planet killer entered Earth's system. It was massive, larger than any ship humanity had built. Its weapons began charging. The Cub fleet intercepted it. Subin's ship, the Eternal Phoenix, led the assault. The Cubs knew their weapons couldn't destroy something that large, but they didn't need to destroy it. They just needed to stop it. All ships with Phoenix modifications, Subin said calmly. This is why you volunteered. This is why we're here. 20 ships broke formation. Each one carried the Phoenix modification that one ship had designed years ago. Each one was piloted by Cubs, who knew exactly what they were choosing. One ship himself piloted one of those ships. The young engineer who had designed the system now used it for its ultimate purpose. For those who come after, he said, and aimed his ship at the planet killer's reactor core. The 20 ships struck simultaneously. Overcharged engines screaming at impossible speeds. They hit the planet killer like hammered nails, punching through armor, driving deep into the massive weapon's heart. The planet killer's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up Earth's sky like a second sun. All 20 ships were destroyed instantly. But Earth was saved. Subin watched from her bridge, tears streaming down her face as 20 phoenixes disappeared in flame. They knew, she whispered. They all knew. On Earth, billions watched the explosion. They saw 20 young people sacrifice themselves without hesitation to save their world. At Talrith Prime, Minseo led the assault on Krethos's fortress. The Cub fleet, supported by Velrin's rebels, pushed through the defenses. The battle was fierce, desperate, and costly. Minseo's ship took heavy damage. Her crew fought fires and system failures while maintaining the attack. She thought of her mother, who had died protecting others. She thought of all the cubs who had sacrificed themselves along the way. "We're almost through!" Her weapons officer shouted. The fortress's shields failed. Minseo's forces poured in, fighting room by room, corridor by corridor. High Warlord Krithos made his final stand in his command chamber, surrounded by his most loyal warriors. Minseo herself led the final assault. She found Krithos waiting, weapons ready. "You," he said, recognizing her. "The daughter of the one I killed." "You didn't kill an idea," Minseo replied, raising her weapon. "You just proved why it was necessary." The final battle was brief. Krithos fell, and with him, the last of the Empire's organized resistance. The war was over, but the cost had been devastating. Of the millions of cubs who had enlisted over 3 years, less than half survived. The youngest generation had paid the heaviest price. Memorial services were held across the galaxy. Names were carved into stone. Stories were told and retold. The cubs who fell were honored not as soldiers, but as heroes who chose to protect what they loved. 20 years later, Minseo walked through a memorial garden on Earth. She was 39 now, the same age her mother had been when she died. Her own daughter, named Jiwoo after her grandmother, played among the monuments. Millions of phoenix emblems marked the graves. Each one represented a young person who had heard a message and decided to act. An elderly Talreth approached. Velrin, now an ambassador, moved slowly with age. "They still speak of her," he said, gesturing to the statue of Jiwoo that stood at the garden's center. "In our schools, we teach about the commander who showed us that strength without purpose is empty." "She would find that ironic," Minseo said. "She never wanted to be remembered. She wanted to be unnecessary. But you made her necessary," Velrin replied. "My people made her necessary when we chose violence over understanding. And when we killed her, we showed your entire species exactly why she fought." Young Jiwoo ran up to her mother, wearing a small phoenix pin on her jacket. Not for war, but for memory. She looked up at her grandmother's statue, with wide eyes. "Was she really as brave as the stories say?" the child asked. Minseo knelt beside her daughter. She was braver. But more importantly, she was kind. She fought because she loved people, not because she hated enemies. That's what made her special. "And the cubs?" Jiwoo asked. "Were they really that young?" "They were," Minseo said softly. "Some younger than they should have been. They gave up their childhoods, their futures, to protect others. Some of them were my friends. Many of them I commanded. All of them I remember." She stood, looking across the memorial garden. From this angle, the thousands of individual phoenix emblems formed one massive phoenix, wings spread, ascending into the sky. "They thought killing one woman would end a war," Minseo said quietly. "They didn't understand that she wasn't just one person. She was an idea made real. The belief that we could be better, that we could protect what matters most." Velrin nodded slowly. "Every cub bore her emblem and took the field. They turned what should have been your defeat into your greatest strength." "Not defeat," Minseo corrected. "Transformation. Mom's death didn't end the war. It changed what we were fighting for. Before, we fought to survive. After, we fought to protect something worth surviving for." Young Jiwoo reached up and touched her phoenix pin. "Maybe," Minseo admitted. "But if there is, we'll face it the same way. Not with hatred or revenge, but with the understanding that some things are worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth sacrificing for those who come after," the child recited, having heard the words her whole life. "For those who come after," Minseo agreed. As they walked through the garden, the sun set behind Jiwoo's statue. The light caught the memorial phoenixes, making them glow like they were rising from flames. Somewhere above, in the space stations and colony worlds, young people wore the Phoenix emblem, not as soldiers, but as a reminder of what their parents' generation had sacrificed, a reminder of why freedom mattered, a reminder that ideas, once ignited, never truly die. The Talrith had thought killing Jiwoo would break humanity's spirit. Instead, they had forged it into something stronger than steel. They had created a generation that understood sacrifice, that valued protection over conquest, that fought not from hate, but from love. The Phoenix had risen from the ashes of one woman's death, and in rising, it had lifted an entire species with it. The war was over, but the legacy continued. Every cub had borne the emblem. Every cub had taken the field, and humanity would never forget the price they paid, or the reason they paid it. For those who came after, for those who would come after them, for all the tomorrows that young people died to protect. The Phoenix flew eternal, carried forward by those who remembered and those who would never forget. And in the end, that was the truest victory of all.